What is up, everybody, and welcome to Celtics Talk Weekly Pregame Live. I'm your host, Seamus Arlingo, aka Celtics Got Every Day on Instagram. Alongside of me here, Justin Lowe, aka at Celtics Rising on Instagram. We're here for the first ever iteration of pregame, and I will say this is going to be a very short and sweet pregame leading up into this one because it is our first one and we're not really sure exactly how we're going to go about the entirety of this particular show relative to the post-game show. But we're making our debut here tonight, Justin, on the pregame show because this one's a pretty big game at the Garden. The Houston Rockets, yes, the Houston Rockets and Ime Udoka, led by our former coach in Boston, the Boston Celtics former coach who led them to a title 2 years ago, a title run, that is, not the actual title, unfortunately. But Ime Udoka, he re-enters the Garden tonight and makes his debut with his Rockets team against the Celtics. Justin, we walk into this game tonight, a little bit of an emotional contest against an old coach, but what are your thoughts and the overviews on these two teams coming in?
Well, you look at the Boston Celtics, and then you look at the Houston Rockets. Obviously, one's in the Eastern Conference, one's in the Western Conference. One is the 1 seed, one is the 9th seed. But something else that's opposite about these two teams is their home and away records. Boston is the best home team in the association, currently riding an 18-0 home record. Houston Rockets, on the other hand, they're one hell of a home team themselves, but they're one of the worst on the road. They're 4-12. Now, despite a 4-12 record, they're coming off of a 112-110 win last night in Detroit. And I do want to note that this game's going to be interesting, Seamus. You mentioned Ime Udoka's coming back, which is interesting enough. Feels like the Celtics haven't played in a little bit. The starters probably getting some fresh legs because I'll tell you right now, if you're a Celtics fan and you watch that Milwaukee Bucks game, those starters didn't play in the second half, Seamus. So it'll be interesting to see how these two teams go about it. I'm sure we'll kind of take a little deeper dive into the Rockets here coming up, but I do want to note, last night the Rockets got a nice win in Detroit, but Şengün 38 minutes, Green 39, Van Vliet and Smith both 44 and 41 minutes. So the Houston Rockets, they don't have fresh legs, but they're one hell of a team to keep an eye on.
No doubt. The Houston Rockets, that last night's game, we were texting back and forth. We were talking last night, and we were going, come on, Pistons. Do we want them to win this game? Do we want them to be motivated? The Rockets coming into tonight. But I think last night's game, the Pistons did their job. They took the Rockets all the way down to the final buzzer. Jaden Ivey almost hit a game-winning 3 against them. I think that would have actually maybe been a negative for the Celtics potentially. You play that whole game, you lose. Maybe there's some extra motivation. Instead, the Rockets win last night after a hard-fought contest in Detroit. And they come into tonight, and all of the players we see on the Rockets roster, a lot of minutes played, as you mentioned. And what just happened on Thursday with the Celtics? We literally just went through this the last game. We have not played another game since then. This is our pregame show, the first pregame show ever, folks. So we've not had another postgame show since the last game. What happened? The Celtics, they play 40 minutes plus. All the starters, all the top 6 of the roster, really, they play 40 minutes plus against the Timberwolves. The next night, they come in back-to-back on the road against the Milwaukee Bucks, and they laid down, completely laid down in the early portion of that game. The rest of the game, the bench, congratulations to the bench on, of course, winning the second half, but completely laid down. I'm not going to go out and say the Houston Rockets are going to go and lay down tonight because I think Ime Udoka gives the Rockets an extra motivational factor that other coaches might not bring, and maybe situationally they're just not as, they're not really developing towards a championship. They're developing in the sense of building a culture and putting wins together. So I think tonight they will still have that motivation, but they're not that great of a team on the road. I believe you mentioned 4-12 on the road on the season, and they almost lost to the Pistons last night in Detroit. And the Celtics, they really need to take advantage of that tonight at the Garden, the game coming up real soon. But on this pregame show, we're going to be introducing a segment where we talk about the X factors of the game. Every single game coming in, who will be the X factors, not necessarily the key matchup in the game or not necessarily who, the star players will be, but the X factors in the game. And Justin, we're going to hear you first talk about your X factor for our opponent, the Houston Rockets, and then we'll go back and forth on this.
Yeah, so there's a lot of guys on this Houston Rockets team, both veteran players and young players. This Houston team has a mix of veteran and young players, experienced and inexperienced players. Obviously, Şengün having a career year, career highs in points per game, career highs in assists, as well as field goal percentage and free throw percentage. But there's a name that's newer to this roster, not only newer to the roster, but newer to this league. A little bit of a surprise here is Cam Whitmore. Now, Cam Whitmore, 19 years old for the Houston Rockets, who was drafted, fell all the way down to 20. Teams were shocked that he fell all the way down to 20. A little bit of injury status kind of held him back in the draft, but he averages 8.5 points a game. And listen, here we go. I was so excited. I was looking up and down this Houston roster, and I'm looking at the last few games for Houston because, the last few games for Houston, they're 4-6. They're kind of a mid team. The last 10 games, he scored 11 or more points in the last seven out of last 10 games. So it's like this guy is producing very, very well. He's also getting rebounds for the team as well. So I just looking at the bench unit for the Houston Rockets, right? Earlier in the show, I mentioned they're on a second night of a back-to-back, Seamus, where their starters played between 35 and 45 minutes last night. They're going to need some production off the bench. Cam Whitmore has shot 50 or over percent on a minimum of 5 shots in 8 of the last 10 games. So he's shooting the ball at a high clip, and he's averaging the points. He can score the ball. He can shoot the ball. He can get to the basket. I'm really looking at Cam Whitmore to be the X factor tonight for this Houston Rockets team on a second night of a back-to-back.
I really liked your X factor earlier tonight when we went through these together, and I never gave you mine though, so this one's still a secret. My X factor tonight for the Houston Rockets, and this one not necessarily a star player, but still near the top of their roster, Fred VanVleet. And here's why I think he's going to be the X factor. We've seen in the past when he's played for the Raptors, Celtics, they play the Raptors quite a few times in the past. We saw them a 7-game series against the Raptors in the bubble against Fred VanVleet when they had Kyle Lowry, when they had Pascal Siakam. They still have Pascal Siakam, that is, but it was right after their championship run. All the championship pieces were still there in their primes with that squad. And when the Celtics would face them 4 times a year, face them in the playoffs, Fred VanVleet, if he was making his shots, the Celtics would have a pretty tough time getting him off the floor. However, if he's going to come out with the line of, say shoot 6 of 17 tonight, it's going to be pretty hard for the Rockets to come out and win this game if he's not making shots, because he is a smaller player. He gets after it defensively, but the Celtics' length is so overwhelming to other teams that when other teams have these smaller guards like the Houston Rockets have Fred VanVleet in their lineup, it's something where if the player does not play up to their standards or even beyond them, the Celtics are just going to have a heyday with an opponent. And I think tonight Fred VanVleet is going to be the Rockets' X factor, whether or not he can consistently make shots, because I think we've seen in the past, particularly in the regular season, the Celtics have been able to shut down Fred VanVleet. They've been able to easily take a game. And if the Rockets want any chance tonight, they're going to have to get Fred VanVleet going a little bit, even after all the minutes played last night. But moving over to the Celtics, our X factors for the Celtics, this one hits home probably a little bit more than all of our opponents, and we'll be able to articulate them a little bit better. But Justin, let's hear your X factor for this Celtics tonight against the Rockets.
So what's funny, Seamus? We sit here and we take notes before, and we had our meeting pretty much all day. We've been on the phone together, and we didn't script this at all, because I'm very glad you mentioned the Celtics' overwhelming length and the Fred VanVleet matchup, because my X factor for the Celtics tonight is Jrue Holiday. Now, listen, Jrue Holiday was phenomenal in the Minnesota game, getting a huge steal and then hitting the dagger 3. But in his home return back to Milwaukee, he had a really rough day. In fact, he got benched at halftime. So it was a really rough homecoming for him. Jrue Holiday is he shot 2 of 9 in his homecoming. Just not a good game for him in the Celtics. Listen, we talk about the Celtics' size, and we talk about Fred VanVleet coming in at 5'11". He tries to put 6 feet, 6'1". No, he's 5'11". Drew Holiday 6'4". You need to seize that matchup. You absolutely need to take advantage of that matchup, whether it's defensively, whether it's offensively. I think perimeter defense tonight is going to be big too, Seamus, because we mentioned guys like Dylan Brooks, who's having a career year shooting the basketball in a 47-40 clip. That's a career high in both categories for him. Fred VanVleet is upwards of 40% shooter from the field and from three-point range. So we mentioned that as well about Fred VanVleet, who is your X factor. It's going to be a big night for the Celtics, especially Drew Holiday. I need a big game from Drew Holiday, especially coming off of such a rough game in his homecoming back to Milwaukee. Really look for him to seize the matchup against Fred VanVleet tonight. Now, listen, it's tough to do key matchups because you and I kind of pondered over this topic of key matchups. Well, it's like Fred VanVleet and Drew Holiday, yeah, they're both point guards, but that doesn't mean, especially in today's league where there's so many switches, there's so many drop coverages, there's so many different defenses. The Celtics run a 2-1-2 or 2-1-2 zone many times. So it's like these guys aren't necessarily matched up the whole game. But for me, it definitely be when Drew Holiday is matched up on Fred VanVleet, he needs to seize that matchup, and that Drew Holiday would be my X factor.
Yeah, for the Celtics, looking down their roster and looking relative to what the Houston Rockets have on their roster, I think Al Horford is going to be my X factor tonight for the Celtics, and he's part of the group who was with Ime Udoka 2 years ago on the Celtics finals run. And I think there was some healthy competition within that squad, even beginning of the season with Josh Richardson, Dennis Schroeder in the building. I think those guys even had a nice cohesion with the team outside of the court. And I thought they all, when they came inside the facility, all had a competitive nature to them that was healthy and not toxic in any way. There's 2018-19 where the competitiveness for minutes is a little bit toxic, but that particular squad and playing together, they were nice. And Al Horford, of course, was a part of all of that. And Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Al Horford, all of the players, Derek White too, at the end of the season, all of those guys who played with Ime Udoka, I think they're going to have a competitive spirit tonight, and especially Al Horford, who's our grizzled veteran, right? This Rockets team, they're very young. They're young and they're old. It's like they have these old guys they implemented older per se, maybe not old, and then they have younger guys. But some of the younger guys are their bigger guys, Jabari Smith, Alperen Sengun, and they give them a lot of their size. And I think if Al Horford can take advantage of the young guy mismatches tonight down in the post, and of course hit the corner three, hit a big fourth quarter three, it feels like it happens every single game for Al Horford. Right. I think if he can get going a little bit tonight, we could see a nice Al Horford game against his former head coach, who he spoke very highly upon when they played and coached and, of course, went through an entire season together 2 years ago in Boston. So tonight, Al Horford will be my X factor for the Boston Celtics. And that's, to me, X factors. I think they get a little bit more like you guys just heard us talk about our X factor. I think those got a little bit more in depth than what we could possibly bring out from other segments. I like that we can go and just talk about other guys on the roster and not just the stars. But before this game starts, because we are a couple minutes from tip off, we want to talk about what this game means for both teams as well. And we're going to split this into three categories where what does this mean tonight? What does this mean for this week, the last week for any given team who comes into the Garden or the Celtics, or the whole season? The long scope. The Celtics are obviously going for the championship. Rockets are building a little bit of a culture, the long-term scope of the two teams. So, Justin, what does this game mean tonight for both teams in all three of those terms?
Yeah, I mean, you talk about building a culture, and I'll start off with the Houston Rockets. Look, this team is revamped, right? They brought in some veteran free agents like Fred VanVleet, Dylan Brooks, Jeff Green. They brought in Jacques Landale as well. Also, their young guys, Sengun is getting going here, Jalen Green. So it's like this team is tired of losing. This Houston Rockets team is tired of being on the bottom of the standing since James Harden has departed from the Houston Rockets. So you get that vibe, right? Like, these guys are going to be gritty. These guys might not be up on the Celtics level, but these guys want to show that they can hang out with these teams, the Milwaukees, the Bostons, go ahead and throw out the Timberwolves, because those guys are at the top of the conference now. All of a sudden, they want to show that they can hang out with these teams. They might not be on the level of these teams, but they definitely want to show that they can compete, especially now that they are competing for a play-in position spot or bottom of the playoff tier teams. Also, Ime Udoka return game. Like, let's face it, Udoka tries to play the shrill cool game. Like, hey, man, like, yeah, I had some success here. I wasn't really thinking past Detroit. Damn it. The Pistons were 3-35. You damn well know you were looking past Detroit and looking at the Boston Celtics at the TD Garden with a chance to end their 18-0 home streak to start the season. As far as for Boston, I don't know if you want me to go through Boston and Houston, or you want to go through your Houston, or do you want me to just quickly say something about Boston? I don't know how you want to do this.
Yeah, I guess we should have talked about how we structured the team beforehand, because I could go through Boston, you go through Houston, because I do think you did a nice job on Houston there, and there's not a ton more I could. I mean, there's a lot more we could talk about with Houston, but in terms of their what does this game mean for them tonight? It's obviously Ime Udoka playing his former squad. I think any time in any sport a former coach plays his former players, it's always an interesting dynamic to see which playing field gets ahead, because we see a lot of questions in sports where it's like, is it more the coach? Is it more the player? This has obviously been the Brady Belichick question for so many years now. All of a sudden, 4 years going on. Can't believe it's been that long since Tom Brady's been in the building in New England. But it's been 4 years, that conversation going on. We know it quite well in the Massachusetts area that, the matchups when that happens, there's definitely some questions of who has the upper hand. Is it the talent, the IQ and the talent? Do they know what the coaching philosophy is, or does the coaching philosophy, did they build the players up within a system? And I think it's going to be interesting to see in their first game against Ime Udoka tonight, whether or not Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum will struggle or not, because we have not seen them go up against a former coach ever. This will be the first game ever in Celtics history, in Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum's history, where they go up against a former head coach. And who knows, they might have their worst games of the season tonight. The Houston Rockets might have the Celtics number, because maybe Ime, what Joe Mazzulla's implemented, Ime knows all of the little bits and pieces of what's implemented within the system, to the point where the Rockets gain more advantages out on the court than we can foresee at this point in time before the game. And we're going to know a lot more in the next 3 or so hours, the next 2.5, 3 hours, as the Celtics, they should be tipped off right now. I don't have the game in front of me. I have our broadcast in front of me right now, so I can see our beautiful faces, but not the beautiful faces of the Boston Celtics, who should be about underway with the Houston Rockets as I speak right now. But this game tonight for the Celtics, as an overview, I think I talked about more Houston. I said I wasn't going to, but the Celtics, they need to get back on track from this last stretch. They're 3-3 over their last 6 games, and that's not all that great. Just looking at it raw. Now, explanation-wise, you can see we were clearly hosed in Indiana. OKC is a tough opponent. We played competitively in that game. And then, of course, the other night in Milwaukee, that's just, to me, that's a throwaway game if you come out and win tonight. However, if you come out and lose tonight, if you're the Celtics, that's all of a sudden three of the last 4 games they've lost. They're 3-4 in their last 7. There's more conversations about what's going on all of a sudden than what's going well. And I think there's still a lot going well within the Celtics locker room, on court for the Celtics. And tonight's game, they need to come out with intensity, come out with energy early on, punch the Houston Rockets in the mouth. Dylan Brooks didn't play last night, not literally. I know that some players might actually want to punch Dylan Brooks in the face sometimes, but not literally. Celtics, just come out and punch the Rockets figuratively in the face and get going early, because this game is going to be, even if the Celtics are up, say 12 in the third quarter, it's not going to be a game the Celtics can just cruise through, sit down, roll over, and expect to win. They're playing their former head coach tonight. They're playing a tough team. And let's add this note in too. Dylan Brooks didn't play last night in Detroit, and he's one of their top minute getters. And for all the minutes that everybody did play last night, Dylan Brooks, he's not an X factor tonight for any of us, but he definitely could be from the
Got the
fact he's
freshest
the
legs.
only rested player on their team, and he is one of their top
Well,
usage, top minutes getters on the
so
Houston Rockets.
it's also similar to Al Horford. Like your X factor is Al Horford. Like don't forget, Al Horford didn't play against Milwaukee. He's got the freshest legs on the team right now. But really quick before we end this, and go on to the last segment. I just want to say, like, as for the Celtics, you absolutely cannot lose this game. You lost by 35 points on national TV to the Milwaukee Bucks. Now I get it. I understand that you were on a second night of a back-to-back. You came off of an overtime game against the Timberwolves where all the starters played 40-plus minutes. I get it. The excuses roll on. But there is no excuse to go out and be trailing at halftime. You had the largest you were trailing by the largest deficit of the season at the half. It was 75-38. You would have thought you were playing NBA 2K with the sliders turned up. The Celtics got dogged on national TV so badly, they had to put the New York Knicks game on, and the Knicks game was no better. They were just down by 20 instead of 30, so they kept that game on. So not only did you get embarrassed on national TV, but you need to come out. The starters benched in the second half the other night. There's no excuse for a poor game from the starters tonight. How do the Celtics respond? We talk about these good teams. We talk about these great teams. It's all about how they respond. You're not going to win You're not going to go 82-0. You're not going to win every game, and not every game's going to be perfect. Not every possession is going to be perfect. But at the same time, the Celtics cannot stink it up tonight. The Celtics also can't get complacent. They can't just say, go like this with oh man, we're 18-0 in the Garden. The banners are up. We have 17 of them. We're 18-0. We're off to the best start in Celtics franchise history at home. We're fine. Absolutely not. That cannot happen. The Celtics need to put the pedal to the metal. And you mentioned it. Just because the Celtics, if they're up by 12 to 15 points in the third quarter, this is not the Houston Rockets team that's going to roll over. This is not the Houston Rockets of the last 2, 3, 4 years. This is a really, really, really solid Houston Rockets team. Now, I do mind you, Houston on 0 days rest on second nights of back-to-back. They're 2-4, right? So that's not great. But they also score the most on second nights of back-to-back. They average 116, nearly 117 points per game. They also commit 10.5 turnovers, which is pretty solid if you base it off of what they're like between 1 and 4 days rest. So although their record might be wonky on a second night of a back-to-back, they are pretty sharp on second nights of back-to-back statistically wise. So the Celtics can't come in. They cannot lay over, and they have to come out with the victory here tonight.
Yeah, I would say the game is underway right now, and the Celtics are up 6-4 within the first 3 minutes of the game. From what I've seen so far, I would say the defensive effort, Houston getting to the bucket, getting downhill a little bit too easy right now. From my viewing experience so far, we've seen a Dylan Brooks kind of post up with Jason Tatum. There was a foul called that really didn't look like a foul. It looked like Tatum had all ball. They call a foul. Tatum went berserk. And then Houston had a couple of drives to the rim, a nice offensive rebound by Jabari Smith, putting it back in and now going to the line, trying to make it 7-6, and he does with 9:36 left in the first quarter. The Celtics, I don't know. We used to talk about how well they started games, right? We used to talk about they have to get out to a hot start. They have to do this. And even tonight, you want to come out with energy and intensity. I think that's just an implemented given within the game of basketball is you want to have a hot start. But I haven't really noticed the starts mattering a ton for the Celtics this year in terms of the scoring. I think the tone setting in the early portion. Now, if it's 16-12, Celtics are up 16-12, 14-12. I'm usually not sweating it. I'm sweating more of, are we getting good looks? Are we getting downhill, going to the rim? Are we preventing drives to the rim? Are we getting in passing lanes, mucking up passing lanes? I think that's what I look at more at the beginning of games than, say, the Celtics. Like this with this particular team than, say, them taking a lead, per se, because we've seen a couple games this season where it's 23-11 in Sacramento, and what happens? Right. The team completely turns the corner because they're playing the right way. The results aren't coming, but they ended up specifically in that game taking it to a whole nother level. But Jaylen Brown just forces a turnover at half court and then turns it over going towards the rim. It was a 2-on-2. It was a little wasn't quite a 2-on-1 situation, but 8-7 Celtics got Alperen Şengün versus Porzingis, lays it up and in 9-8. Houston Rockets on top. I'm just calling the game at this point. I don't even know what we're doing here. But for the pregame show, at this point it's a during the game show. It's a current game show. And I know, Justin, you don't have a screen in front of you right now, so I'm going to let you go and catch the game so we can analyze it afterwards. But this was the first iteration of the Celtics Talk Weekly pregame show on the Celtics Talk Weekly YouTube channel. Of course, we'll be on here for postgame. Justin, you'll be joining me, correct, for postgame, and then not really sure who else is supposed to be here.
Whoever pops in
post game, we'll see. We'll see if Ian and Rob pop in, but me and Justin will be here regardless, and we'll be here for more pregame shows moving forward. The Celtics, of course, they take on the Rockets tonight. We'll be there after the game, and then we'll be there before the game when the Rockets take on the Raptors on January 15th, and we'll be after the game for that as well. So the next 3 broadcasts, come check us out on the Celtics Talk Weekly network here. Justin, any final thoughts going into this game?
No, just
check off here.
Go in, take care of business. I really want to see third quarter Celtics. I really want to see good third quarter Celtics. Celtics have had some rough times in the third quarter. I also want to see the starters in the third quarter. So let's not have another game where we see no starters in the third quarter. But Celtics Rockets, Ime Udoka versus Joe Mazzulla, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown versus Şengün and Fred VanVleet. It's going to be a good game. It's going to be a fun game. Hopefully we're talking about a Celtics win after the game, but if not, we'll still be here nonetheless for Celtics post-game live.
Yes, no doubt. We will certainly be here for all of you covering our favorite basketball team. And hopefully
One second. Should, and now I know we're past pregame introductions, and I have not yet to see any videos or read any tweets. Should Celtics Nation boo Ime Udoka upon his return, whether it's introductions, during the game, after the game, whatever? Should Celtics Nation boo Ime Udoka?
No, I was actually going to release an opinion on this right before the game, but as you heard behind the scenes, what happened to me,
I won't
even go into it. I won't even go into it. So I was gonna release an opinion, right? I was gonna say yes. I don't know if you asked me if should they boo him or
should they boo Udoka?
If I think fans should ultimately, they should give Ime Udoka. I had to get my opinion right here. I was like, wait a minute, where do I stand on this topic? Hold up. Fans should give Ime Udoka a standing ovation upon return, and I'm interested to see whether or not they did. I'm sure we can go see on Twitter right now if Celtics Nation did stand up for him, they booed him, if they even gave him a reaction, because it's possible that they, some people, they don't pay attention to the head coach. They barely even knew that Ime Udoka was in the building when he was fired. So I think the Celtics, for what happened to Brown and Tatum during Ime's run with the Celtics, I think for me personally, that deserves a standing ovation because he boosted Brown and Tatum into further stardom, showed them another path in the NBA, and led them to the finals as a head coach. And unfortunately, got into some business off court that didn't have any legal ramifications other than him losing his job and his beautiful wife. However, criminality wise, there's nothing we can really, boo Ime Udoka for. He's not a criminal, guys. Just setting that one out there for his reputation. So I do believe he deserves a standing ovation upon his return to Boston. And just an unfortunate situation which happened. And I think even now looking at it, we're still in 2 good situations. Is it the most ideal situation for Ime Udoka from where he was with the Boston Celtics? No, but he's still coaching a very good Rockets team, turning the culture around, building a new culture in a very big city in Houston. And Brown and Tatum are still, of course, developing alongside another developing head coach in Joe Mazzulla, who's done a fantastic job, and now all of a sudden has just as many games head coaching as Ime Udoka under his belt. Just want to point that one out as well. And I think everybody within the situation, even though what happened was so unfortunate, everybody came out all right,
Right.
all right,
Right.
at this point in time, and we can still look at some positivity surrounding it. So yeah, Ime Udoka, I don't know what happened. We'll have to see exactly what happened with him,
Uh,
but it's just so interesting that he's coming back to the Garden, and I never would have pictured that
mm,
this would be the scenario. Him coming back to the Garden with the Houston Rockets. I'm glad it's not with the Brooklyn Nets. Personally, I
right.
think the Rockets are actually one of not my favorite Western Conference team necessarily, but they're a team I look at and go, yeah, I hope they succeed because what Ime Udoka did in Boston. Hearing and seeing him in the pre and post game pressers every single day. Uh,
Right.
Not a bad guy, and
Right.
I wish success upon any of those players within that situation. But the Celtics, of course, going through the game with the Rockets right now. They're in the first quarter with the Houston Rockets, and the Rockets are actually up 18-14 with 6:22 to play in the first quarter. We will be on here with you guys after this game, reacting to everything that happens between the Celtics and the Rockets between now and the end of the game. Catch me, Justin, on Celtics Talk Weekly, post game live, airing right after the final buzzer. We will have you covered. Like I always say, folks, thank you all for listening and go Celtics.